Are you too busy, too stressed out, unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Hello and welcome. I'm Diane Randall, your host of Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, the show that provides inner tools and strategies to help you create the life you want, even with the busiest schedule. Today's episode is How to Not Die at Work. My guest is Dr. Joel Kahn, a cardiologist and the founder of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. Today, he's going to talk about how the number one killer in America develops, how we can detect it very early, how we can prevent it at work with lifestyle, and how we can reverse it with nutrition, exercise, and supplements, based on Dr. Kahn's number one best-selling book on Amazon, Dead Execs Don't Get Bonuses. Hello, Dr. Joel Kahn.
Well, good day to you from Detroit.
Oh, you're in Detroit, and I'm in Chicago.
Oh, right. I almost can see you. I almost can see you across Lake Michigan.
Yep. Welcome to the show. Unfortunately, I wish I could say this subject matter isn't so close to me.
Well, I'm sorry to hear it is close to you.
I am just excited that you're here to help us to learn how to better health and healthy living in the workplace and at home. So, Dr. Joel, can you just tell us more about you? I mean, your resume is huge.
That's very kind of you. But I got the bug long ago. I'm in my mid to late 50s. But I had a little heart murmur as a kid, got interested in medicine, got interested in cardiology specifically, and pretty much knew early on in life that's where I was headed. Along the way, met a nice girl in fifth grade, been my wife for 35 years, and we went up to Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. I got accepted into a program where you got into medical school around age 17, which was kind of nice. It was a great program. And the first day of undergraduate studies, I walked into the dormitory and looked around and said, I'm a vegetarian. Everything else looks horrible. It was just a visceral reaction, not based on anything else. Grew up, kind of in a typical omnivorous house, a lot of goulash and meat and potatoes. Mm-hmm. And just as I progressed in medical school, a residency, it wasn't what I was learning in school, because back then and now you rarely will hear anything nutritional in the lecture halls. But some people loaned me some books, and some friends, and Ann Arbor was a very vegetarian-friendly kind of place. So at the end of all that, on my path to cardiology, I learned how to put in balloons and stents and treat heart attacks. Came back from Dallas and Kansas City to Michigan to practice here. But I always just taught patients, I can give you prescription drugs and I can put a balloon or a stent in your heart. And that's what I love to do. But you may not need any of that if you'll just make some lifestyle changes. And just, dedicated myself to learning on the side when I had time. Read a book here, maybe go to a program there, watch a YouTube or video, and got more and more interested to the point about I was lecturing around Detroit, but went back to university a few years ago and decided I'm going to really change my life and mix it up a bit and leave the cath lab where I had spent much time and much love and had done a lot of helpful procedures, I do believe, but said I was going to shut down and it was going to transition over to really an aggressive attack on preventing cardiovascular disease with lifestyle, nutrition, and all the rest. So that's what I'm at now. I have a rather unique clinic in suburban Detroit with long appointments with patients, working with them on their lifestyle, very advanced evaluations. We find out if there's any disease of any kind, and then we work very hard to reverse it. Some of that is nutrition. Some of that is supplements. But really, at the end of the day, it's all about this topic you're on the path of, which is how do you manage your life with work stress, life stress. How do you end up healthy at the end of the day? And, there are some strategies that maximize it. Certainly nothing guarantees it, but definitely maximize it.
Well, that's exactly why I'm happy that you're here. As you know, my clients and I've worked in consulting for many, many, many years, over 20 years. And the main thing I've seen is people, high level, high functioning, successful people with heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, strokes from just working so hard, not taking breaks, not really paying attention to what we eat in the workplace, going out, being wined and dined by the clients, okay, and also whining and dining by the clients.
Right.
I am so happy you're here because I've had close friends, family members, colleagues who have definitely had to look at life differently after having a cardiovascular event. So if you could tell us how career-minded people die without warnings and, even after they've gone to the doctor, as you said.
Right. So it's true of career-minded people and others because the disease is similar. Perhaps career-minded people, as a general rule, the American population is lacking in eating well, exercise, managing stress, and getting good sleep. There certainly may be more pressure on those on an executive path, an entrepreneurial path, where there's always 10 more projects to do rather than the health club or the visit to the local farmer's market.
Yes.
But the bottom line is it's because the disease is such a difficult one. I mean, heart disease heart attack, strokes, and dying suddenly is a very tricky disease that progresses inside 3 heart arteries for months to years and years, even decades without symptoms. You can have your arteries badly blocked, even totally blocked, and not have a warning of a pressure, a squeezing, a tightness. I mean, if you got a wrinkle or a crow's foot around your eye, you don't know if you got these heart wrinkles, these aging of arteries, because the heart has an amazing capacity to deal with slowly progressive blockage for a very long time. So your doctor takes out a stethoscope and listens. It's a great habit. It's worthless in terms of identifying early blocked arteries. They do an electrocardiogram. It's worthless. It's great if you've had a heart attack.
What?
It's worthless. Well, it's worthless. You do a stress test. Your doctor says, look, it's not ordinary, but let's do a stress test. You're 45 or 50. You feel good, but stress test will pick up a very, very, very small number of people with silent blocked arteries. It's designed for people with very bad blockage. You really would rather not find out when you have very bad blockage. It will find that, but what about all the other people? So, at the end of that visit, that so-called executive physical, some people will get age 40 to 50. And I'll just throw in a little detour that actually it's not recommended to get a stress test at age 50 unless there's something amiss like chest discomfort, unusual shortness of breath, or an abnormal electrocardiogram. It's actually discouraged because it's not a very good test. But if you have all that at the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic, you pay a few grand, somebody patched on the back and said everything came out okay. It's absolutely inaccurate in terms of telling a person if they're developing this number one most common disease of aging, atherosclerosis. You have to actually look at the arteries. The heart is surrounded by 3 arteries, or about the size of a number 2 pencil. We now have a way to do that for the heart, and we have a way to do that for the arteries to the brain that are extremely accurate, what we call quantitative. So it's not like yes, no, it's how much on a scale. Okay. And we can absolutely characterize you as saying, wow, you're 48 years old, but your arteries are like a 35-year-old, which would be a great thing to be told. My mother's 83 and her arteries measure more like a 56-year-old. God bless her. And I'm glad she's my mother. That probably predicts well for children. But I have many 52-year-old patients who have arteries of 75 and 80-year-olds. And oh my God, they hate hearing that. But there's cholesterol or blood pressure, blood sugar, family history, obesity. There's things going on, but we took it beyond to be highly accurate. So it really takes, a kind of a new paradigm. I'm not the only physician in the country that feels that way, but it's not common enough that, and I'm glad your audience is hearing it. And of course, we can go into a few details.
Well, I'd love to go into a few details, but first, I'd like to kind of go back because I always thought, and I've had a time where I went to the hospital with shortness of breath and there's more anxiety than anything, but I took the stress test, I took the electrocardiogram, and they did blood work. So you're saying that doesn't really tell the story.
If the question is, at the end of that, am I certain that I have clean arteries that are not developing atherosclerosis and I don't need more intensive therapy? I mean, everybody needs a good lifestyle, but that is, worthless is a strong word. Once in a while, you do an electrocardiogram and you do find a silent heart attack, but you're going to miss the majority of cases of early cardiovascular disease. And, unfortunately, it'll often be the emergency room visit when you find out you got a 90% blocked artery, or a funeral and an autopsy when you find out. I have had an interest in a 25-year history of being an expert for medical legal cases in the courtrooms, So I've looked at hundreds of clinical histories, office visits, emergency room visits, and autopsies. And to find 3 arteries 80 to 90% blocked with essentially no clue during all the visits is a dime a dozen. It's just a tough disease, and we have to up the mechanism by which we identify it, and then we can attack it and reverse it.
So what is the right way? I thought even blood tests would get.
And again, right. Blood, actually, as long as you say blood test, that actually has progressed, and it's still not widely available. But there is a FDA-approved blood test by a company called Corus, C-O-R-U-S. It actually it's called genomic expression. It has to do with genes. If you're in your doctor's office with sort of unusual chest pain, and you send this blood test off, it comes back with a score of 1 to 40. The higher the number, the more likely, according to research, you have blocked arteries of significance. So if it comes back 38 on a scale of 40, there seems to be genes that are active that are trying to repair badly blocked arteries. If it comes back 1 or 2 out of 40, it's very unlikely. Now, that's based on one large study comparing the test to heart catheterization in people with chest pain. It's not a screening test. You're 45 years old. You just want to be checked. I see a lot of people in my office that walk in and say, I feel perfect. I just ran a 5K. I never have a symptom. Just check me. This wouldn't be the test, but there is a blood test. But really, we'll leave that aside for a minute. CORUS, you can read about it. It's not all that expensive. The real 2 tests, there is a CAT scan. You look at, you want to know if you have a breast lesion, you get a mammogram. You don't do a blood test. You look at the breast. You want to know if you have a colon polyp. You don't take out your stethoscope and put it on the belly. You do a colonoscopy or a barium enema, and you look at the colon. So for the heart, the clue is to look at the arteries. And it turns out, fortunately, that when there is hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, this process that often begins in our teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond, there's almost always calcium mixed in the hardening of the arteries. That's where the expression hardened arteries come from. The arteries become calcified. They're no longer flexible. And you can do a CAT scan. This is the key core message to write down. There is a CAT scan that's been available for almost 20 years, but the technology has advanced tremendously so that you literally lie down on a stretcher, you roll in a CAT scan, you hold your breath maybe 20 seconds, you roll out, and you go home. There's no IV, there's no iodine, you can't have an allergic reaction. There is a small amount of radiation. It's a CAT scan, but with modern CAT scanners, and with the need to only image these 3 heart arteries, a relatively small slice through the chest, the whole thing's over. It's not discomfort. The amount of radiation's about on par with a mammogram. And, women have mammograms without, unreasonable amount of concern about their exposure to radiation. Usually this heart CT scan actually is just a one-time event, or maybe once every 10 years. So it's quite infrequent, less frequent than a woman might get a mammogram. And it's called a coronary artery calcium scan, or coronary artery CT, or coronary artery calcium score. And the word score is important because there's actually a number. The big advance was when this ability to image the heart arteries and see if they're calcified, meaning that there has to be plaque there, has to be disease, was when a software program was developed. And this is long ago, 15 years ago, that allowed how much calcium is there. You want to be a zero. You want that CAT scan to be run through the software. The report comes out, your coronary artery calcium score is 0. If you achieve that, the likelihood that you will be, not only do you not have blockage, but the likelihood that you will be free of the risk of heart attack for at least 5 years, maybe 10 years and beyond, is as close to 100% as it gets. There's actually no better test. Blood work, EKG, any other device. This has been tested in large trials of thousands of people. The best predictability is a calcium score of 0. If it is, and then it can be not 0. It can be 10 or 50 or 500 or 1,480 or 2,374. The higher the number, the more extensive the amount of hardening of the arteries. Plus, you know where it is. Is it all in one artery? Is it spread amongst the 3 heart arteries? There's an artery called the widowmaker, the LAD, the front artery, tends to be the most heavily calcified, which is unfortunate because it's also the most important artery to the heart. And it's important to know that. It's important to know if your widowmaker is clean or your widowmaker is clogged. So that, it is covered by insurance in a few states. Texas passed legislature that everybody at age 50 can have that test as part of their health evaluation at age 50. There's an incredible documentary you can watch on Netflix called The Widowmaker that explains why the Texas legislature approved that. It was really a well-fought battle by one state legislator. But in my state, Michigan, it's not covered by insurance with any predictability. And it used to be $800 to $1,000 a decade ago. Well, one hospital in Detroit, it's $80.
Oh,
one hospital, it's $100. Okay. I've seen hospitals in North Dakota where it's $70, and some do it for $49.
Okay, so what you're saying is that it's affordable.
It's affordable, it's quick, it's painless. The person who doesn't need it, other than a 15 or 20-year-old, is the person that already knows they have heart disease. So the person who's had bypass, a stent, a previous heart catheterization showing they have a 50% blockage, they already know they got the problem and they need intensive evaluation. This is for the larger group of people that have never been checked and are assuming because of their yearly or every couple of year doctor visits, they must be fine until Gary Shandling 2.5, 3 months ago drops, James Gandolfini drops, Rosie O'Donnell didn't die, but, was caught on the precipice of death with a 99% blockage. Unfortunately, a few years ago was treated. The celebrities bring it to life, but it's all those other people. You open the paper every day, the majority, or actually the largest percentage, let's say that, are people who are dying of this disease, most of whom did not know about it till the day that they keeled over and died.
And I'm sitting here thinking that the blood work also would tell me, like I get this blood work done twice a year and I look at the numbers and I'm thinking, okay, I'm good.
It gives you it allows us to estimate, but I don't think you estimate with the number one killer in America. Okay. Not when there's the ability to know highly accurately. Sure, somebody with diabetes, cholesterol 300, smoker, is going to be more likely to have a problem than not. But God knows I've been in that situation with 2 patients, both looking terribly unhealthy. And I can just think of that example right now, Peter and John. Peter, everything wrong. His calcium score at age 72 comes back 2. I mean, his arteries are almost pristine at age 72.
Wow.
John, his score comes back over 2,000. He ended up having bypass surgery about a month after the CAT scan, which is unusual, but it was the only way we identified the severity of his silent heart disease. And, we basically probably helped him save his life by getting the correct therapy. Unusual, but important. So just to wrap up, there is a second way at the data. You have two arteries to your brain called carotid arteries. You can do a standard ultrasound at a church, at a school fair, and certainly at a hospital, and they can come back with a report that says your carotid arteries have no significant narrowing or minor narrowing. But there's a much more accurate way to do it where, you have to have software. It'll analyze, and the report comes back. You're 48 years old, and your arteries are as thick as a 70-year-old. Oh, my God, does that upset my patients? But it's motivating. Or you're 48 years old and your arteries are young. That's the kind of test my mother had. So that's called a carotid IM thickness ultrasound, intimal medial thickness, CIMT. Little less available. That CAT scan, every city that has a decent sized hospital has the right kind of CAT scan. And with a few phone calls, hello, do you offer the heart, coronary artery calcium CAT scan? Some place in your city will say, yes, I do. And it's $150 or it's $99. You might need a prescription from your doctor, and that may be difficult to tell them, hey, I want this, state-of-the-art, top-level screening of my heart, when that family doctor or internist may not be all that familiar with it. This is a shameless plug, but if you read my book, Dead Executives Don't Get Bonuses, which describes the science and the practice of using this test, and hand it to your doctor, you'll get a prescription.
And that title of your book certainly gets one's attention.
Well, it came from a lecture I gave with that title to a group of high-level entrepreneurs, and the reaction was so profound. It really was. They said, please write it up. We'd like to share it with the rest of the people in our C-suite and our employees, and we'll buy it for them as, birthday presents. And I don't know if 1 or 100 people have, saved their lives because they've gone for testing in the last year and a half, but I'm sure it's been a few.
Well, that is just great to hear, because until I talked to you today, I definitely had a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings about how to even know if you have heart disease.
The only comment, that commonly comes up, I have patients that come see me in Detroit. Well, I went to the Cleveland Clinic, which has every reason to respect the kind of medicine. And they told me I'm abnormal, but take an aspirin and a cholesterol medicine. I went to Mayo Clinic. They told me I'm abnormal, take an aspirin and what do you do with the information? And, there's an endless amount you can do. It obviously revolves around a healthy lifestyle. So maybe for the listeners, there is a lifestyle that's been described that helps prevent 85% of heart attacks. And that's something we're sharing. So out of studies, for example, they'll take a city like Copenhagen, and they'll interview 20,000 people in 1985, and then they'll count in 2010, 25 years later, how many of those 20,000 or 25,000 people ended up having a heart attack, all of whom were free of any known heart disease at the beginning. And what comes out of it is about 6 lifestyle habits that I'd certainly recommend to the person who has this abnormal heart test, but I'd recommend it to anybody. Number 1, don't smoke. No surprise. Number 2, walk 30 to 40 minutes a day. Of course, you can do more, but do not sit on your rear all day long. Standing's good. Walking's even better. Number 3 is sleep 7 hours to 8 hours at night as a goal. That's kind of a new one in the cardiology research world, but the data is pretty strong, and it's a big problem that most people don't achieve. Number 4 is keep your waist thin, because that fat around the waistline, visceral abdominal fat, is particularly inflammatory and bad for the heart. Number 5 is a tough one. Eat more than 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. That's not just because I'm a plant-based guy. That's what the science says. Whether that 5 or 6 or 7 servings a day is next to a small piece of fish or next to a piece of tempeh, you got to eat a lot of fruits and veggies. And the last one is the fun one. An occasional alcoholic drink during the week favors the absence of heart attacks. So you can add that one in. I would also throw in dark chocolate is on the list too, although not in this particular study. So 5 or 6 little things to do every day if you find out you have this heart calcification or not, to prevent heart attacks. But if you have the calcification, you can get really aggressive with lifestyle, with diet, with infrared sauna, and with some vitamins. My patients actually see their calcium scores start to come down, which is basically reversing heart disease, which is pretty crazy, radical, and wonderful.
Is that all without medication?
It may involve medication. If they have high blood pressure, they'll be on something till maybe they lose weight and don't need it anymore. And, for example, but it's a lot of vitamins in addition.
Well, let's talk about, I know for me, in my 30s, because I had this high demanding career, I had high stress, high blood pressure, and in my 40s, I had high cholesterol. And what I saw from that was med after meds. I was in this metabolic category. My doctor would tell me all the time, which meant that I was probably going to have a stroke or a heart attack if I kept down that path. So about 9 years ago, almost 9 years ago, I became purely plant-based because I was desperate in wanting to turn that around, because I was afraid. I had children, I had a family, I had a career that I loved. So that was my awareness, or my awakening, to really look at what I needed to do to reverse the path that my life was taking with all these conditions that I had going on. So how do you get your patients? Because like I said to you, I was plant-based, and you said so we didn't have to fight about it. How do you get people to do plant-based food when they're so conditioned, and everything in us tells us that we should be eating processed food and meat because it's so good?
Yes, indeed. They know how to make it taste good, and thank God to our government for making it inexpensive with all the subsidies. Somebody's estimated that if we didn't have so many government subsidies for corn to feed cows and soy to feed chicken and fish and such, it would be $75 to take a family of 4 to McDonald's. And that certainly would put a little damper, on the enthusiasm for processed food. So, thank goodness, and I'm saying it very sarcastically.
Oh, I know.
We need to subsidize carrots and celery and peas and beans for human consumption. But how do I get them? Well, if they find out they have a silent or an overt heart process, they're a little more motivated, but God knows they don't flock to a completely plant-based. In fact, many of them have never heard of it. Bringing up the name, I do a quiz, tell me the difference between tempeh and seitan. And I get this look, like people say, like a deer staring at your headlights. At least in Michigan, we see a lot of deer on the highway. They probably aren't up to snuff on what plant-based nutrition, meat substitutes, and healthy eating can be. But I just ask them, please watch the documentary Forks Over Knives. That's, extremely powerful, 75, 80 minutes. I might ask them, to pick up a book by Dr. Dean Ornish. The Spectrum is his most gentle entry into understanding plant-based nutrition. It describes, the spectrum might be very adherent to such a eating plan if you have diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease that you're trying to reverse, prostate cancer, and such, and a little less adherent if you're just doing it to shed a few pounds and just feel a little better and get away from the fast food habits that so many people have. So it's a spectrum. I like to live totally on the plant-based side like you, but I'll love on people as they move that way, because I wasn't born that way. I evolved in my eating habits. There is a great online free program called 21daykickstart.org. It's put out by a medical group in Washington, D.C. Free menu, free shopping list, free recipes for 3 weeks, starting the 1st of every month. So it'll start July 1, August 1, September 1. You get emails from Carrie Underwood, hey, Dave, you're doing great on day 7. Here's your recipes. I love my plant-based diet. helps me sing in Nashville or whatever. But they do have celebrities like that have gotten involved. And it's totally free. You can't buy anything. It's not buy my powder and my capsules. It's just a good, healthy way to jump in. Beyonce has been famous for a 22-day program called 22-Day Nutrition, 22daysnutrition.org. There's one called engine2diet.com that has a 28-day eating program by a hunky athlete fireman, Rip Esselstyn. So for the guys, it's beefy chilies and stews and burgers, but of course they're all lentil and bean and pea and, they're plant-based. So those are how I try and get people in. I own a restaurant in Detroit that's a gourmet, plant-based, healthy place. So if I'm in Detroit, I just try and capture them with my cocktails, and then I hit them over the head with my plant-based, entrees, and they were impressed that they didn't sacrifice anything. In fact, they left feeling better than they walked in. And but there's so many resources now. I mean,
well, I use a company called Vistro. It's a 100% non-GMO food company, which I love. I also have used Plant Pure Nation because I'm busy and I don't like to cook that much, but I want to be really healthy. And sometimes I travel and I'm going to some little place in the South, some little city that where I can't find like a place to find healthy things other than vegetables. So I'll even pack things in my suitcase and take them with me if I can.
Right. And so your listeners know there are now half a dozen at least companies that you say, okay, I'll give this 2 weeks, but I don't know how to cook this food, or I don't even know how to find my kitchen in my house. There are these companies that will deliver to any address in the United States, 5 days, 7 days, 2 weeks. You decide what you want. Prepared meals, sometimes fresh, sometimes frozen, sometimes organic or not, sometimes with oil, without. You can kind of pick which menu you want. Forksoverknives.com has such a program. This 22 Days Nutrition. Vistro. There's one in LA called Medi Meals, kind of designed for doctors to write a prescription. Oh. So yeah, it's really great to have these options, because I recommend it to patients all the time to say, you don't even have to worry about it. If you can spend about $150, you can get a week's worth of food. It's usually about $10 an entree, which compared to restaurant expense for sometimes an organic filling meal of plant-based foods, you still probably want to make a salad at home because they're not usually shipping, really fresh produce.
Exactly. Now, I didn't get the name of your restaurant.
It's Green Space Cafe in Ferndale, Michigan. Pretty remarkable place, very large, very elegant. We basically took a LA idea, although we're not a franchise, and just plopped it into suburban Detroit. We would open about half a year. And for a cardiologist, this is my lab where I can experiment and transition local health for the better by feeding wonderful and tasty and really just great food. There's a big industry now in making cheese without dairy, cashew-based and such. So we have the most amazing cheese plates and lasagnas and tamale pies and such, and just great stuff. Burgers, lentil burgers with cheese on top. I mean, we're not trying to mimic McDonald's, but you can do all this actually without added oil. So it's unbelievably healthy.
That is so awesome. And what I hear you saying is things are really changing in terms of food choices and how we get them. But I also have people who say, I don't have money. I don't have money
right.
for that. So what do you recommend when...
Eat your beans and rice. I mean, you can't find a less expensive and kind of health, related menu than beans and rice, with some vegetables. Farmer's market, going to one of the big box stores, buying more in bulk, frozen. Frozen tends to be a pretty good nutritional value, frozen spinach, frozen berries. And then, you have them without an excuse and you buy them in bulk. You'll have them available. So, what's expensive? Meat's expensive. There's certainly good quality. The answer is, well, we buy grass-fed beef and such. If you want to be in that 5% I'm not saying it's elitist, but it's not what the masses do. You're going to spend a lot more than you're going to spend on a big bag of red kidney beans or pinto beans or black beans that you soak overnight, and then you don't get so much stomach noise when you eat them by soaking and sprouting nuts, and always trying to add some fresh food in, whether it's, greens or sprouts or fruit.
Awesome. Well, one last thing I'd like to ask you before I end the show is you have a campaign that you have launched to prevent 1 million heart attacks through healthy living. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, if you actually look at the number of heart attacks just in the United States per year, which is over 1 million, and you talk about we've got this plan I described to you, just by changing lifestyle habits, that you can prevent 85% of heart attacks. And then you add the high-tech part of it, which is screening for $85 or $100 to really identify the high risk and the low risk and wrap lots of love, around the high-risk person with a lot of calcium in their heart arteries. I think it's actually not even a question that we can achieve it. There has already been one real-life example worth sharing real quick. In the late 60s and early 1970s, the country in the Western world with the highest rate of heart attacks was Finland. And there were literally a decimation of these healthy farming type 38, 42, 44-year-old men and women from heart attacks, and as well reported. So a group of researchers in one county in Finland, it's called North Karelia, got together and said, we got to do something because we got a whole lot of widows and widowers and we don't have a workforce like we used to. And they put up signs everywhere with basically 3 messages. Don't smoke, add 1 or 2 servings of vegetables a day to your diet, and stop slamming everything with butter, which was a Finnish tradition to eat a lot of animal saturated fat. Lo and behold, 5 years later, 85% of heart attacks had been banished. Their drop in heart attack rate was phenomenal. And it was so impressive, the program was spread to the whole country. Yes, they asked the question, was it the smoking, the vegetables, or the drop in animal saturated fat, predominantly butter? And they showed it was all of them, but they actually emphasized it was the dietary change and the drop in butter that got the most credit for dropping. And there still is a low heart attack rate in Finland. They've rebounded a little. Their diet's not as pristine as it was in the mid-'70s and late '70s. The message isn't being taught as strongly as it was by the country. But it's a phenomenal real-life example that, any other argument you have about butter is back, you got to bring up and seriously look at what happened to Finland. So, it can happen. So there's absolutely no reason. We could have relatively empty emergency rooms, coronary care units, cardiac catheterization laboratories, but you're not going to find a pharmaceutical or a hospital or a, procedure-based kind of company like Johnson & Johnson that makes heart devices that really wants that right now. They should be teaching. Everybody should be learning that exact lesson. But there's still a big industry in treating disease and far smaller industry in promoting and teaching wellness. Right. We're getting enlightened. People like you are doing it.
Well, my whole thing is I feel we have to take ownership of our lives, and collectively, I feel we can do it. Small steps at a time. And with doctors like you who are plant-based and advocate plant-based instead of, not to say you don't do surgeries, but surgery and medicine aren't really the first thing. You really take a look at the lifestyle. So that is just awesome.
At least present the option, because what I think is so interesting. Once in a while, I'll talk to an adult diabetic. Maybe they've been on medicine a number of years or on shots of insulin, and they've never heard that there's books and research and videos, including that movie Forks Over Knives, that lays out for them that there is the potential to reverse diabetes through lifestyle and dietary changes. It may be hard, but, within 3 to 4 months, they may be off most or all of their prescription drugs. So some people just get, on fire to learn that that's an option, and you've totally changed your life. So if nothing else, we owe it to them to just let them know that the possibility is there. And this stuff is science-based. This is published literature as strong as the data for insulin and metformin and the other stuff.
This is so awesome. And I want to thank you for coming on Balanced Living for Busy Professionals today and really educating us on what we can do to prevent the number one killer in the Western world, which is heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Thank you so much.
Well, debt execs do not get bonuses, so whether you do it to cure the world or just be sure you're around to enjoy retirement, grandkids, and a couple fishing trips, it is important to learn more. My website, drjoelkahn.com. I'm always posting stuff, or Twitter at Dr. J. Kahn. Debt execs is, I think, 99 cents on Kindle. Not going to hurt anybody, or maybe it's about $14, in print. It'd be a good thing to read a little bit more and get the coronary artery calcium scan in your community.
I will have Dr. Joel Kahn's information, his websites, his books, his information in the show notes of this episode. So
super.
If people want to reach out to you, they certainly can. I have a feeling that this is huge for a lot of people in general that work and have a lot of stress in their lives. We all can do it. We can do it with our own will, not having to buy everything to get healthy. So, Dr. Joel, I just want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day, and wish your listeners the same.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please, feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.